So I had a bit of an epiphany recently as I watched my poor wife. She had to endure like this prescribed carnivore diet in order to try to diagnose some chronic stomach issues that she'd been having. So for like 2 weeks, she couldn't have anything but meat and salt. And then on the first day that she was allowed to introduce just like a few vegetables and some spices, she was like a kid in a candy shop. She was so excited. She wouldn't stop talking about how much she loved onions and squash. Meanwhile, I was looking at her meal thinking like, that doesn't look so good. But it made her so incredibly happy. Only the most decadent feast could have ever evoked that kind of a reaction out of me. And it immediately revealed one of the most profound truths of Christ's teachings, which I could have articulated, but seeing it so vividly portrayed for me in my wife's experience, it gave me this renewed appreciation for how true it is. It's the idea that denying yourself increases your ability to love more of what's on offer in the world. Like her appreciation for all the variety of food that God has created has dramatically increased since going on that diet. Meanwhile, for me, I'm just like, yeah, I guess squash it's okay. But for her, it's as if she's unlocked all the glory of squash as one of the things that God has created that deserves the kind of excitement that only she can now show for it. So the epiphany for me, which is more of a reminder than anything else, was that self-denial increases our ability to love more things, whereas self-indulgence narrows the things we love and appreciate. So the more you indulge in the world, the more you become a connoisseur of its offerings, which is to say you become like more picky about what you can enjoy, which often leads to a simultaneous condescension towards those who can enjoy more than you, almost like an envy of their ability to do so. That's why art critics look down on people who are able to enjoy just normal art. If that's you, they'll accuse you of liking kitsch or calendar art because you don't have the refined and exclusive sensibilities that they do. Or maybe normal people just have a simple appreciation for any art that has merit because they aren't excessively exposed to it. They have enough deprivation of it that they can have a proper appreciation for more forms of art. And why wouldn't you want that? Why wouldn't you want to be able to enjoy more of the world around you rather than be hypercritical of most of what you see? Seems to me that we're trading our ability to enjoy more of the world for pride in a scenario like that. And this is an insight that the modern world, especially as our own material prosperity and comfort have increased, we've completely forgotten. And not by accident. There's been a deliberate push in this direction from our teachers and our thought leaders. As we were crossing into this new modern age as a civilization, there were many philosophers and thinkers who were intent on obscuring or refuting this idea. David Hume, for example, he attacked asceticism as a symptom of superstition, like an irrational attempt to please God through self-torture and contrived humility. And forgive me for including such a long quote, but I think it so vividly describes the sentiment. So he said this, quote, "Celibacy, fasting, penance, mortification, self-denial, humility, silence, solitude, and the whole train of monkish virtues. For what reason are they everywhere rejected by men of sense? But because they serve to no manner of purpose, neither advance a man's fortune in the world, nor render him a more valuable member of society, neither qualify him for the entertainment of company, nor increase his power of self-enjoyment. We observe, on the contrary, that they cross all these desirable ends, stupefy the understanding, and harden the heart, obscure the fancy, and sour the temper." And honestly, that's just simply not true in my experience. It doesn't sour the temperament or prevent you from being able to enjoy the world. My wife's recent experience is a very vivid and simple example of how much more of the world she can enjoy. But Hume wasn't alone in that. Philosophers like Voltaire and Rousseau made similar criticisms. And then as we move into the postmodern age in which we occupy now, we get people like Nietzsche, who said that Christian practices are just about self-derision and self-mutilation and illustrative of a faith that hates life and seeks to elevate the weak over the strong. Freud believed that Christian morality institutionalizes what he called the superego, which is a mechanism of internalized guilt and needless self-punishment. Bertrand Russell, the famous atheist, claimed that Christianity's emphasis on chastity and mortification, it only produces shame and fear of what he called good and natural desires. Foucault, one of the most if not the most cited person in post-secondary papers, claimed that mortification is not liberation, but an instrument of control and tyranny. Marcuse argued pretty much the exact same thing. And I think it's easy to sympathize with those claims. On the face of it, why would you want to deny yourself the pleasures and the fulfillment of what appears to be natural desires, especially when those desires are often seemingly life-giving, like food and procreation? Why should we admire a celibate like St. Francis who voluntarily lived in poverty? And yet, Catholics and non-Catholics alike do admire St. Francis. And most people wouldn't say that they're crazy for doing so. So where does that common intuition come from? And who can deny that mortification and self-denial are unpleasant and therefore undesirable, at least per se? It isn't hard to look at the prospect of those practices with like a sense of resentment and even horror, depending on how far they go. I imagine most of us wouldn't be thrilled if a doctor or like a spiritual director told us that they want us to undertake a regimen of serious fasting for like a month. I think those philosophers knew that if you admit that asceticism is beneficial, then you also have to admit an even more uncomfortable fact about ourselves. Because if someone like Rousseau, for example, is right, if human beings are by nature innocent and pure and good, then deliberate or voluntary deprivation is a cruel and arbitrary form of self-hatred. Because if we're good by nature, then it shouldn't be beneficial. In the same way that a surgery or a serious medical intervention would seem horrifying if done to a healthy patient. But if it's a desperate appeal to save a life that's become ill, then it becomes something we can obviously allow and even admire. But if Hume and Nietzsche and all the rest are correct, you'd think that their claims would be pretty easy to validate. If people like St. Dominic and St. Francis and even contemporary people like St. Teresa of Calcutta, if they were all just embracing a kind of pathological, life-sucking suicide that only breeds resentment of life, then why did they all seem to be filled with such a joy of life? And simultaneously, why do the super rich and powerful seem to be so miserable and dysfunctional? Why are celebrities and billionaires all on their third marriages? Why do so many die friendless, alone, and miserable? Why are their families just such a catastrophic mess? Why are so many addicted to drugs and have to engage in nefarious activities at places like Epstein Island? If following your passions and indulging in your desires was the path to happiness, why aren't they all so clearly happy? If the modern world and all those modern philosophers are correct, then the sharp contrast between someone like a St. Padre Pio and someone like a Prince Andrew would be just night and day. It shouldn't even be close. The error of someone like Padre Pio's insane renunciation of the world would be written all over his life. And meanwhile, Prince Andrew, not to mention the rest of his family, should be a model of moral and psychological integrity and health. And yet, at least from outside, the exact opposite appears to be true. And again, I look back at my wife's experience, which is fully endorsed by my own experiences of fasting and self-denial. The more I deny myself certain luxuries, the broader my appreciation of the things I've lost then becomes. In short, the more I find myself able to love a broad range of what exists in the world, including its people. And simultaneously, the more I indulge in my desires, the less fulfilled and the less satisfied and the less capable I am of enjoying what's on offer becomes. Like if someone gave me, I don't know, $1,000, I'd be like, wow, thanks for that. But if you gave that to a truly poor person who needed it and could put it to good use, the gratitude and appreciation would just be off the charts. If you invited me to dinner at your house, I might be like, yeah, okay, thanks. I'll have to check my schedule because I have a full social life. I have the luxury of being able to be selective about who I spend my time with. But a lonely person is someone who will accept an invitation from just about any person of goodwill. It's a sad fact that I'm more selective with my affections than someone who has been denied the same rich social life that I enjoy, all of which just goes to show that deprivation really does breed a greater capacity for love of the world and a greater appreciation for its many wonders, and love of other people and the glory of another person who is created in God's image. And again, that should tell us something about ourselves. If asceticism is beneficial to us, something that can look like an extreme and unnecessary invention to very smart people like Nietzsche and Hume, it confirms that there's something wrong with us. something that modern philosophers would want to deny. It confirms that humanity is fallen and in need of redemption. How else would you explain the undeniable fact that serious intervention yields benefits to those who undergo it? You don't have to be Catholic to appreciate this in principle. Look at the nature of hard work and discipline. We tend to admire people who have such discipline, but how often do we appreciate how much self-denial it takes to succeed in any meaningful way? We look at sports icons and think, wow, they're so talented. But if you attributed all or even most of their talents to biology and genetics, I bet they'd be pretty annoyed by that, because it dismisses how much time they sacrificed to the complete devotion of excelling in this one thing. When other kids were playing video games, going to parties, or just taking the weekends off to do whatever they wanted, these guys were training. They were putting in the hard work while the rest of us just sat around and followed our inclinations. You can't achieve that kind of excellence without huge measures of self-denial. So why should the spiritual life be any different? Even our basic education system is predicated on this principle. What parent hasn't dealt with a child who doesn't want to go to school, but we make them because we know it's for their own good? The selfish part of them that wants to stay at home and play has to be denied for the good of doing something that is unpleasant to them. That's the defining principle of mortification. And it would make sense that the more you deny yourself, the less selfish you will become. And the less self-centered you are, the more you will be able to appreciate the outside world that isn't contained within the narrow confines of your own ego. This all explains the truth of Christ's statement about the blessedness of the poor, because everyone likes that saying, but mostly just as an agreeable sounding sentiment, almost like a platitude. But how many people could actually explain why the poor are blessed, or use that as motivation to do what St. Francis did in embracing a life of voluntary poverty? St. Francis actually believed the truth of that sentiment, while the rest of us just admire the sentiment from climate-controlled living rooms with monster big screen TVs. Who can deny that we would all be a lot happier if, when we look around at all the people and the objects in our proximity, it came naturally to us that we just enjoyed them, that we loved them, that we were thrilled in our very souls, the way that onions and squash currently thrill my wife. Imagine if squash could get you as excited about being alive as the most decadent of luxuries. And if you can imagine how that could be the case, why not embrace an existence that makes that possible? Our aim in life should be to love more and to be less selective, less discriminating, less supercilious. And self-denial is the mechanism by which we do so. This is why Jesus, who is love, tells us that if we want to follow him, we have to deny ourselves and pick up our crosses. This is why the church emphasized vocation as such. It's the lifestyle that forces you to sacrifice for love's sake. In something like marriage, we're almost tricked by our passions to unite ourselves to another person. But when the intoxication subsides, we become forced to either learn to compromise, learn to sacrifice for the other, or just be miserable in that union. And it only escalates as it moves from a single person in your spouse to a multiplicity of self-sacrifice for your children who can't return the love that you show them in anything approaching equal measure. So that it becomes much more truly a form of self-sacrificial love. It profoundly reveals the intrinsic compatibility of sacrifice, self-sacrifice, and love. This is why those who don't deny themselves, those who don't voluntarily make those kinds of sacrifices, they will miss out on learning to fully realize their ability to love. In fact, I'd say they never really reach the kind of love that we were all called to perform. Their love will only ever be based on a narrow range of affections that happen to tickle their fancy, based on a preference that will only narrow as they continue to pass through the period of their lives. And amazingly, it's pretty much just Catholicism that articulates this principle today. Atheists deny it as self-hatred. Modernists deny it as contrary to the joy of the gospel. Protestants deny it as a works-based gospel. Yet it's the secret to abiding happiness. The more you are willing to lose, the more you will be able to love. And the more you are able to love, the happier you will be. Which is why whenever I find myself slipping into something like depression or despair, I ask myself, what do I need to sacrifice? In what way do I need to take more seriously Christ's call to deny myself? Because that is the path to spiritual and psychological health. Okay, thanks for watching that. I hope that was a blessing to you, that it encouraged you and edified you in your journey with the Lord. And if it did, and if you want to support the work that we're doing as a result, which thank you so much for considering that, because we really do need your help to make this viable. Then there's a few ways you can do that. You can go to brianholdsworth.ca/help, which is obviously my website. And there's some options there. One is to just contribute through my website. The other would be to join us over on Locals, where you can interact with me and other like-minded people. You can gain access to exclusive content where we're doing live streams and I'm uploading videos and things like that. But we're also doing a secret philosophy study with a secret philosopher academic who's joining us once a month to take us through difficult texts that we want to read on our own, but we need some clarification and some guidance on that. So right now we're working through some works by St. Thomas Aquinas with him, and he's a Thomistic philosopher. So if that's interesting to you, join me on brianholdsworth.locals.com. And again, you can check out my website at brianholdsworth.ca/help.